process, VR services, and interpreter roles. Thanks to the staff of the Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission for providing the content for this PowerPoint. The last presentation reviewed the various steps in the VR process. Each of these steps involves services provided by VR, services that may require an interpreter. Throughout the entire VR process, VR counselors provide career and vocational counseling and guidance. In addition, this chart outlines some of the different services that VR provides at each step in the VR process. These services provide the settings an interpreter may encounter in working with deaf and hard of hearing people as they move through the process of vocational rehabilitation. First, let's talk a little bit more about the counseling and guidance that VR counselors provide to clients. Counseling sessions, while they are focused on determining career goals and pursuing them, can in fact be as in-depth as mental health counseling. Interpreters are needed to interpret between deaf RCDs and hard of hearing, late deafened, and disabled people with no hearing loss. Remember that acronym, RCD? It stands for Rehabilitation Counselor for the Deaf. Interpreters are also needed to interpret for VR counselors who are not deaf and may not know sign language. One thing to know as an interpreter in this setting is that VR clients may have additional or multiple disabilities, and the counseling might include accepting the disability, discovering career options, and learning about accommodations. Consider the challenges you might encounter as an interpreter in these situations. As you review the following slides, it is important to note that each event is part of a process, and that it is developed by the VR counselor and the deaf or hard of hearing person together in what is known as the Individual Plan for Employment, or IPE. The services are mapped to a specific step in the VR process we discussed earlier, starting with evaluation. Part of the evaluation process is vocational evaluation and interest testing, which may take several forms. It may be paper and pencil tests, it may be interest tests with pictures, and many of the tests have been computerized. These tests usually result in information that corresponds with jobs listed in the Department of Labor's Dictionary of Occupational Titles. Vocational evaluation services are provided directly to the deaf or hard of hearing person who is exploring what he or she may want to do for work. Another type of vocational evaluation is a situational assessment. These are often done at work sites where the clients have an opportunity to try a variety of different tasks in different environments to see what suits them. This gives evaluators a chance to look at the person's interpersonal skills, punctuality, and attitude, in addition to his or her ability to do the job. Sometimes they are done on the actual work setting, and sometimes they are done in a simulated work environment. And clients might even be paid a stipend during this evaluation. The evaluation process might reveal that a client needs additional training, such as college or vocational training. Each VR agency may have its own policies about providing assistance to clients who need training. And often, a financial needs assessment is required to determine the student or family ability to contribute to the education. College usually leads to a degree, whereas vocational training may lead to a certificate for entry-level work in the field. If you know some deaf students on your campus, it's highly likely that they have been receiving support to attend college through their local vocational rehabilitation agency. These are situations where you may be asked to interpret directly for the student and not realize that this is part of their vocational plan. In addition to the students who attend community or four-year colleges in a degree program, many clients attend other kinds of training necessary for them to enter the workplace. Some may need to improve literacy skills before pursuing training. Others may attend trade schools that offer training opportunities with courses at nights and on weekends. In many of these post-secondary settings, there are no disability service centers or knowledgeable staff to advocate for optimal conditions for interpreting. One of the most challenging parts of the VR process is for a person to determine if it is in his or her best interest to seek employment that might result in their losing their Social Security or health benefits. The policies and formulas surrounding these programs are very complex and bureaucratic, making them very difficult to interpret. In fact, some VR agencies have benefits counselors trained by Social Security to help explain the policies which affect benefits checks. Think about the resources you might use to prepare for interpreting an appointment where the RCD and job seeker are reviewing this type of policy. Some training is provided in collaboration with employers as OJT or on-the-job training. OJT may be a formal program arranged by VR and the employer, or it might just be an informal situation where the VR provides support, such as interpreters. In either case, this is another situation where, as an interpreter, you may be asked to interpret in a work environment. You might not even know that, in fact, this is part of a training program which may determine if this person will work in this field or be hired for this company. On-the-job training can take several forms at different companies or situations. It may be formal training with computer modules, videos, and lectures. Or it may be more of an on-the-job evaluation, where a person is tried out to see if it is the right field or job for them. The VR services that occur during the planning and employment process might be contracted out to nonprofit agencies to provide the evaluation, training, placement, or initial support services. These agencies are referred to as community rehab providers, or CRPs. The services in these agencies may be provided by deaf staff or ASL proficient staff. Often, job coaches are provided by these agencies to work directly with people as they learn the tasks of a new job. Sometimes, these services may need interpreters for interfacing with employers, either for situational assessments or for actual employment opportunities. During the planning process, VR may provide some type of small group or individual training on how to look for a job. Some VR agencies may refer clients to nonprofits or career centers for these services. Such workshops might be taught by deaf RCDs and have a mix of deaf and hard of hearing participants. Think about how these groups would differ, depending on whether the group had a majority of deaf and hard of hearing members, non-deaf members, or whether the person leading the group was deaf or not. Once the deaf or hard of hearing person has determined what they want to do for work and feels confident that they have the skills needed to succeed in the workplace, they begin the process of looking for a job. Vocational rehab provides various services to assist someone in getting and retaining employment, including preparing resumes, making calls to employers, and negotiating for an interview. The placement specialists may themselves be deaf or hard of hearing, providing a role model for deaf job seekers, as well as for employers anxious about how to work with an employee who is deaf. VR agencies use many different approaches in helping people find employment. They may have in-house staff, they may partner with other government agencies such as career centers, or they may contract with nonprofit agencies that provide placement and coaching services. VR agencies provide support for newly hired clients up to 90 days after they are hired. And this support might mean providing interpreting services, job coaching services, training employers to work with the disabled or deaf employees, and advocating for accommodations. If, after 3 months, it is agreed between the employer, the employee, and the RCD that things are going well, the VR case is closed as a successful rehabilitation. The work of VR doesn't always end when the case closes. Here are some examples of situations where the RCD and interpreter were needed beyond the 90 days. In some cases, there are simple situations that a service is provided and the case is temporarily reopened. For example, if a hard of hearing person needs a new hearing aid, they return to the RCD, and once they get their hearing aid, they can continue at work. But in other cases, the employee needs more long-term help on the job and more than one service. For example, an employer has some downsizing and the deaf person is transferred to a new department. The RCD arranges the in-service training to help acclimate the coworkers to working with the deaf person, and a job coach is retained to help the deaf person learn their new duties. When a deaf employee is having difficulty on the job, some of the most sensitive and complex work in vocational rehab is done. The RCD carefully mediates the situation by listening to both the deaf employee and the employer and making the recommendation that best serves both parties. Sometimes this means negotiating with the employer to change their way of doing things, and sometimes it means counseling the employee to see how they might change their behavior. These meetings can be volatile and emotionally challenging, and sometimes several meetings are needed. And unfortunately, despite everyone's hard work, sometimes the job is not a good match, and the interpreter is brought in to interpret at termination. If an employee is terminated due to cause or downsizing or whatever reason, they are always offered the opportunity to return to VR to receive counseling, guidance, and support as they begin the journey back to employment. I hope this presentation has provided a good overview of the VR process and interpreter roles.